Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest live demo session. I'm Lauren Malhoit, and I'll be taking you through our very demo-heavy webinar today. Mostly, we'll be focusing on DNS and everything that comes along with DNS in a DDI solution. Please feel free to use the Q&A panel if you have questions. I have allowed everyone to talk, so feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to jump in. But like I said, we are going to go into DNS management today. Before I jump right into the demo, I do just kind of want to give a very brief level setting pitch on what Micetro is, in case this is your first chance, your first encounter with us. So Micetro is a DNS, DHCP, and IPAM, or DDI, overlay solution. And what that means is that we are a non-disruptive solution. So you can actually install Micetro in your environment wherever you like, whenever you like, in probably under an hour, without having to change all of your endpoints and all of that, right? By that same token, that means you could actually pretty easily remove us as well from your environment. So what that really means is that we strive to give you the best DDI solution possible, because we know that's the reason that you're going to keep us. And actually, we have a very high customer retention rate at over 95%. So we think people are pretty happy with the solution, but we're always open to feedback as well. I am just going to allow some more folks to talk. We had some folks join, so let me do that. Okay. Now that you've heard what we do, let's go ahead and jump in. As I mentioned, Micetro is a DDI solution, but today we're only concentrating on the DNS part. If you're interested in IPAM, we actually did that a couple weeks ago. It's available on demand right now at Men&Mice.com or on our YouTube channel. And in a couple weeks, we'll be doing a DHCP focused event. You can find all of our upcoming webinars at Men&Mice.com. So we've made it pretty easy for you all. Let's go ahead and dive into the demo finally. So what we're looking at here is the Micetro kind of front page, how to do things. And then going through it, we have, of course, our DNS grid, our IPAM grid, which includes DHCP. You can do reporting. We offer something called DNS workflow, which is a built-in approvals workflow in our UI. I will get to that more in depth in just a few minutes. And then, of course, our admin tab, which is where we're going to start today. We're actually going to start and end on the admin tab. Right here, we're looking at kind of all of the services that we are connected to or could possibly connect to. And Micetro will connect to several different services, whether that's in the cloud with AWS Route 53, Azure DNS, or of course on-premises, things like Microsoft, ISC bind, just from that DNS perspective. And it's really easy to just add a DNS service right here. What I do want to point out is Micetro has a very tight integration with Microsoft. So if you're already running a Microsoft shop, a Microsoft heavy environment, we will definitely come in and enhance that environment for you. So kind of my first example here is if you want to connect to a Microsoft DNS or DHCP server, you can actually do that in an agent-free way. So we do use agents to connect to our on-premises services, but with Microsoft, you only have to install that agent on one server in your entire forest. And then we can use that agent to kind of connect to all of the other servers. So you don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining and updating agents needlessly, right? Or worrying about security patches and things like that. It's only on one server and it's a very small footprint. So I did just want to kind of point that out. Getting out of the DNS server, obviously you can see what the different kinds of services that we have on this particular demo environment. Of course, our cloud DNS services, and it's just really easy to connect. If I pop over to DNS then, to our DNS grid, I see, one second. Excuse me. Okay. If I pop over to our DNS grid, I can see all of the DNS zones that I have in my entire environment. So it's worth mentioning, kind of reiterating what an overlay solution is, right? So I can connect to all of these different underlying services that maybe I'm already using, again, whether that's Route 53, whether that's Microsoft DNS. And what I can do for Micetro is orchestrate all of that and get a centralized UI for things like visibility, for things like consistency in the way that I'm deploying and modifying DNS zones and records, for things like using a standardized API through Micetro, so that I can use the same workflows whether I'm working in AWS or whether I'm working on premises. So worth mentioning kind of what that overlay looks like. So here I'm looking at my master zones. I have all of that information available to me. On the left-hand side here, I have kind of the built-in filters, kind of those commonly used filters that will allow me to kind of parse through and navigate, organize my entire DNS environment. And obviously this becomes more and more important as we spread out, as we become more maybe multi-cloud or hybrid architectures, as we talk about things like SASE. Being able to have all of this in one place makes life a lot easier. So if I kind of go down here, the various filters, I can see, whether I have my primary, my secondary zones, my caching or forwarding zones, I can easily see that. I can see my XDNS zones. I'm not going to dive into that right now. I will in just a few minutes, but suffice it to say XDNS is a unique offering to Micetro, which gives you true DNS redundancy. Like I said, we are very tightly integrated with Microsoft, so we can go ahead and view our 80 integrated DNS zones. As you can see, the authority for this is, a Microsoft DNS server, and I can kind of separate those out in this way. I can see my favorites. Maybe I have a bunch of zones that I work in all the time. If I were to maybe click on one of these and then click the star button, that's what's going to go ahead and add it into my favorites. If I unstar it, it'll take it out. Maybe it's no longer a favorite and I don't want to see that anymore. I can see my recently viewed zones pretty easily here. This is really nice if you're like me and you forget which zones that you've been working in. Even better, I would say, is the recently created and recently modified filters here. So the reason why I love these is whenever anything goes wrong in your environment, it's generally because something was recently changed, whether a new zone or a new something was created, or maybe something was modified. And what's really nice here is, okay, I get a great view of everything that was recently touched and modified. And then I can go ahead and click on the meatball menu and go to view history and see what actually happened recently. I can see who changed something, why they changed it, perhaps in the comments. I can see a description of what was changed and of course the time. And if that time correlates with something going wrong on my network, well, that's maybe not a good thing for the network, but a good thing for me as far as troubleshooting goes. And again, it doesn't matter where this DNS zone resides. It doesn't matter if it resides in more than a couple places. I have all of the information here at my fingertips. And even if changes were made via the API, those would also get logged here in the same place, because the API is not bolt-on for Micetro. I can get various DNS views. So for example, we have here, if I want to see my Azure external DNS, I can go ahead and click on that. Organization is huge, like I mentioned, especially as we are moving towards more multi-cloud architectures, even in our smaller shops, right? As we use more AWS, as we use more Azure, this is just going to become more important, but obviously very important for large enterprises as well, who might have multiple teams or multiple people managing these things from different places. Ensuring that we're doing things consistently leads to less fragile networks, right? I can see anything from a DNSSEC zone perspective. So if I have a lot of zones that I need to be covered by DNSSEC, I can go ahead and view those, as well as reverse zones. What I do want to mention quickly is, so we update the DNS information for your entire DNS environment, I believe every 15 minutes by default. That value is configurable depending on what works well for your environment. But if I were to click deeper into a zone here, then I could, this information is real-time up to date. So when I immediately double-clicked into this zone, it went and checked with the server, and now this is all of the information that is most recent and most relevant to what I'm doing. So definitely worth mentioning that. If I back out of this, there are a couple more things in this left-hand menu which are really handy. So we offer folders and smart folders. And this is, again, just kind of another way to organize and navigate your entire DNS environment. So folders are a static organizational structure. And essentially I can click on any, if I go back to my integrated zones, I can click on any of these zones. I can bulk click on these zones if I want, and I can select add to folder, and then go ahead and select which folder I want those things added to. So again, very static, and I can add whatever I like. If I click on one of these, then I can see what's contained within that folder. Again, this is just organizational. It's not doing anything like multi-tenancy or anything like that. It's just kind of separating things out to what I need to work on, right? So it could be by project. Maybe I am doing some migrations and I want to separate those out. Or maybe I have different owners for different folders or for different DNS zones, and I want to separate that out by team or by owner name. The world's really your oyster. I have the example of schools down here. We have K through 12 school systems that are working with us that maybe want things separated out by the actual school within their district. So lots of examples of what you could use there. The other structure here are smart folders, or saved filters, really is what those are. So you can kind of see this filter information here. If I click on Dottie, everything that's owned by Dottie is going to automatically fall into this smart folder, right? And that's because I am using regex expressions to define what goes into that folder. So if I were to take Dottie out as the owner, then that DNS zone will fall out of that smart folder, right? So it's very dynamic, really useful, especially for those filters that you keep coming back to. The third icon here is the DNS services. So again, it's just another way to kind of separate out, parse through the information that I'm looking for. So if I know that I want to see all of the DNS zones contained on this particular server or in this particular service, I can easily get to that and see what all is out there. Okay. The other thing that I would like to show is we'll pop into a DNS zone here, and I want to show you DNS workflow because I think this is a very cool capability within Micetro. And like I said, it's basically an approval workflow built into the UI. And so essentially what we can do, and I'll go into kind of how we offer role-based access control in just a moment, but the kind of flip side of role-based access control is giving requester permissions to people. So we can get really granular in what they can do down to the DNS record. So let's say I have an application owner or a developer, right, that wants to create a new version of an app that they own. And this service or this app is actually a revenue generating app that our company's customers are using. And often this can take weeks to kind of submit the ticket, get the different teams to work on it. Basically, I just need an IP address and DNS records in order to put this new app first in my dev environment, then probably in my test environment, and then eventually in production, right? So we'll go ahead and create a new record. We'll give it some information here. 0. Now you'll notice that a bunch of ranges popped up here automatically because I typed in, the first 3 octets here. So if I click on this range, this is the only range that falls within that 192.168.0. It will automatically go through and pick freely available IP for me, right? And if I were to, let's see if I can pick one that's not a, so you can see if I do try and pick one, maybe my developer really likes the .1, right? They can remember that it's .1 and they like to use .1. Well, immediately they can see, hey, I can't use .1. That's already been assigned. So that's not going to work for me. They can go through, then pick their second favorite number, right? And that'll appear as free. We do require the owner name here at Men&Mice, and you could require it too. In fact, there are a lot of custom properties that you could require to make sure that all of your processes are being followed, and things like custom properties, which I'll show in just a few minutes, are being populated with useful information from an asset management perspective, as well as indexing and search. Now, down here, you'll see add to request. You also see create now because I am in as an admin. But if I were not in as an admin and I were just a requester, then I would only have the ability to add to request. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that just to show you how this works. So I'm a developer. Maybe I'm doing this through a self-service portal. Maybe I'm doing it right through Micetro. And the access controls have been set up so that I only have permissions to request the DNS record within this particular DNS zone. Now that I have created that, I can go over to my shopping cart here, and you'll see I've done this already a little bit. And this developer has added an app, database, and web tier for their development update, right? And so, of course, I have some other things that I've included there, but we'll go through and we'll click next. So essentially what I'm doing is I can request one DNS record to be created, or I can do it in bulk like I am here, maybe for an entire service or an entire app. And when I click next, I can actually schedule this request. So maybe I need it by a certain date, or maybe I know when the next maintenance window is going to be, but at any rate, I can add it to a scheduling queue if I like. Once I've done all of that, I click submit. And now you see that my shopping cart is empty, success, it's been submitted successfully. Now, because I am an admin, it's asking me, do I want to go ahead and just approve this request? I'm going to say no, just for the sake of the demo. As an approver now, I can come into the workflow and see what all has been requested, see what I need to do. And so you can see that I have one that's pending right here. And if I double click on that, I can see everything that has been requested. And I can click on that and go ahead and select approve or reject if I so choose. I'm going to reject this because I don't really need all of those DNS records. But what's great is that I can actually put comments in all along the way. So the requester can put in comments, the approver can put in comments, and we can, have documentation built in for every step of the process. Let's see if I can type today, and we'll click save. And there you go. There you have a built-in DNS approvals workflow that, of course, you can use with things like self-service, with any sort of automation that you might have already built into your larger environment. I am going to then go back to the admin tab, and I am going to click on configuration. And this is actually, so DNS is obviously the meat and potatoes, the things that we need in order to maintain and update our DNS environment. But what I love about Micetro is actually contained all within this admin configuration tab. And for one, it is a pure role-based access control model. So that means that basically we allow you to either create or use our built-in roles, and those roles can be assigned to general or a system-wide style of permission giving. So it would apply to your entire DNS environment or your entire DHCP environment, or maybe everything under the sun in the DDI realm. It can also apply to a specific DNS zone or DHCP scope, right? So we can get really granular when we're talking about this. And then, of course, taking it even more granular with that workflow capability I just showed. We do integrate, of course, with Active Directory. If I were to click on groups here, I can see that I have some AD groups. We integrate with Azure AD as well. So we're not asking you to reinvent the wheel when it comes to creating these kinds of groups. We will do all that integration and work with you. And then, of course, you can create your own groups within Micetro as well. I also want to, well, let's go over custom properties first, and I'll save XDNS for last. Save the best for last, that's what they say, right? So custom properties to me are an amazing part of Micetro. And I talked about them briefly, right? So if I go back into DNS zones, all of these column headers here are custom properties. Some of them are built in, some of them are defined by me or by my coworkers who also use this demo environment. And I can see all of those here. I can check or uncheck which ones I want to look at. I can rearrange, where they fall from left to right. And so all of these, anything with in these custom properties, anything that's been populated is also indexed. So that means it's searchable, and I can just search right here in my quick filter and see what comes up, right? And so if I search on Dottie, for example, all of his DNS zones pop up right there really quickly. You'll remember that was also in a saved filter here, a smart folder. What's really cool is that I can actually use that filter here and create a smart folder, and it automatically populates that filter. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. Going back to where we were with custom properties. So I can create these kind of identification characteristics that are easily searchable. I can also create like cascading lists or kind of nested lists, right? So a lot of times we see this with geography, but I can get down to, you know, which data center, in which rack, in which slot does a server reside, for example. And it's really easy to kind of track this and edit this and kind of get that information into Micetro. So we have all sorts of import functionality, right? Between if you want to use a spreadsheet or a CSV, you can just import that information. If you have all of that here, you can see what this kind of what the style looks like, right? So Berlin : rack 1. That's 2 levels. We could go another rack level and put in slot 2, right? And then the tree level, of course, if you just kind of want to do a 1Z, 2Z add to things, we can go ahead and edit that there as well. But that's really handy, right? As far as creating processes, especially, right, as we want to integrate more things like self-service, putting in custom properties that may or may not be required to fill out adds to kind of best practices and things like handing over compliance information to auditors, for example, right? We can do a lot of that with custom properties. If we want to do things like asset management, especially cloud asset management, right? We need to know what resources that we're using. We need to know where we're using them. This is where that could all be tracked really easily. Okay, I said I'd save the best for last, and that is XDNS. So we do have entire webinars on XDNS redundancy. If you want to go watch those, we did one recently with PRTG. If you're already using kind of PRTG monitoring in your environment, that's worth checking out for sure. But essentially what XDNS is, again, it's an offering unique only to Micetro, because not only are we non-disruptive, we are non-authoritative. So because we're an orchestrator and because we're not requiring that you use us as an authoritative DNS server, we can actually kind of create a situation where you take maybe critical zones, zones that cannot go down. Maybe they're domain names that are revenue generating services for you, or maybe it's just that, you know, you don't want a prospect kind of going immediately to your customer because your DNS zone or your DNS services are down for some reason. What XDNS does is allow you to make 2 or more services authoritative for one zone or for multiple zones. You know, you might think that it's so hard for maybe some of these external or these cloud DNS providers to go down, but actually there are several recent examples of this, right? Meta went down just last year. All of Facebook, Instagram, several other sites went down. Not because DNS went down, right? But because there was a BGP routing issue due to human error, due to a misconfiguration for the BGP protocol. And basically what that meant is that no one could get to the DNS servers. The DNS servers were inaccessible at that point for anything and everyone, and therefore communication went down, right? That's just how it is. Cloudflare went down a couple of years ago, right? Dyn went down, that was huge in 2016. Those are huge providers whose job it is to remain up, right? Internally, obviously this can happen as well. So the only way that you can guarantee DNS uptime is to have multiple service providers that are authoritative for a zone. Now, you can do that manually, right? That is possible. What's nearly impossible is actually maintaining that. The operational complexity that comes with maintaining that yourself, making sure that everything is in sync at every moment, especially if a service were to go down, right? Making sure that service is also updated and that all of the syncing and replication has been done. That's where things become difficult and actually may add more complexity, more fragility to your network. So we've made it super simple to create this DNS redundancy, right? You give it any name that you want, you add in a description, you can specify your conflict strategy. So override existing zones or merge records, whatever you want to do. We'll just do a quick example here. And then I can add 2 or more services to my XDNS profile. And so I already have several created here. Well, I will show you kind of the example here. The other thing that we can do here is actually reject external changes. Now, Micetro is built to be bidirectional, right? We're very open, very flexible, unlike any software I've ever worked with, right? So you can make changes in AWS still if you want. You can make changes in Microsoft DNS, and we'll just pull those changes in, right? You can deny that those changes or reject those changes as well if you so choose, but we are not trying to dictate that you can only use Micetro, right? We're very flexible. We're doing the same thing here with XDNS. So maybe I don't want the changes from AWS to be reflected on premises. Well, I can go ahead and toggle that on or off, right? I'm going to cancel this for now because I already have several created. If I go back then to DNS, and get rid of my filter. That's the part I always forget. Then I can simply click on the meatball menu and select add to XDNS profile. Now, I probably picked some that aren't, oh, that will work. So essentially what you're seeing here is a pre-flight check. So we want you to have absolute confidence that you are adding your DNS zone to the right profile and that everything's going to work. So we created this pre-flight check. So it tells you, hey, this is why I can't add this zone to the XDNS profile. Or here are some warnings that you should be aware of. I can still do it, but you should probably remediate these, you know? So depending on which profile you choose, it may or may not work. And then you just go ahead and click add. Now, if I click on my XDNS zones, I can see which XDNS zones have been added to an XDNS profile and which XDNS profile is then authoritative for that zone. So I can see that 123vala.is is in my non-critical XDNS profile. And it's as simple as that. And now there's a conflict strategy. Now I know I can be confident that everything is syncing. I can click on this zone and actually see that everything is up. If I look over here to the bottom right, I see that all of the services that it's using are green and I am good to go. That is all I had for today. I promised a quick 30-minute live demo of DNS. If you all have any questions, I am definitely open to those. Please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask directly, but that's it for now. And go ahead and register for our DHCP session in just a couple weeks. Thanks, everyone.